parts of the economy.
I'm going to get into that with you in a moment, but I think it's important that we face what the real numbers are. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says what they call the real unemployment number for April, which again includes people who are not looking for work or underemployed, is 22.8%. But again, that does not include, because the unemployment numbers for April stopped in mid-April, does not include the 7 million people who have lost their jobs since then. So aren't we talking close to 25% at this point, which is Great Depression neighborhood?
Chris, we could be, but let me just emphasize, unlike the Great Depression, where you had economic issues that led to this, we closed down the economy. So it wouldn't be a surprise if you closed down the economy that in half of the workforce is half the people didn't work. And that's why we're very focused on rebuilding this economy and getting it back to where it was. This is no fault of American business. This is no fault of American workers. This is a result of a virus. And that's why the president and I were determined to put together the largest economic program ever to help American workers get through this. So you are correct. The reported numbers are probably going to get worse before they get better. But that's why we're focused on rebuilding this economy. We'll have a better third quarter. We'll have a better fourth quarter. And next year is going to be a great year.
Well, let's talk about that, because you and the president both say the economy is going to come roaring back. But I got to tell you, and I want to ask you about a number of signs which indicate that the recovery is going to be much slower than that, sir. Job losses are not just in the hospitality industry, airlines, restaurants, as you would expect, but they're more widespread. The white-collar and government sector, 3 million jobs lost. Major retailers like Neiman Marcus and J. Crew declaring bankruptcy, and the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says unemployment at the end, not of this year, but of 2021 will still be 9.5%. Question, are your rosy predictions based on economic reality or the November election?
Chris, let me just emphasize, first of all, these numbers impact real people, and I want to emphasize we understand what this is, how this is impacting real people. So they're not just numbers, it's impacting real people. My numbers aren't rosy. What I've said is you're going to have a very, very bad second quarter, and then I think you're going to see a bounce back from a low standpoint. None of the economic models have ever worked in predicting what happens when you close down due to medical reasons. So my predictions are based upon what I see is the rate of reopening in a careful way. It's also based upon my views, and I've personally heard from many of the doctors that have vaccines and virals in trials and their expectations of being able to get a vaccine by the end of this year and having real viral treatments. The advent of testing, all these things are going to help give American business and American workers the confidence to reopen in a careful and a deliberate way.
And what about the food supply chain that farmers and processors say is broken because they can't get their meat and they can't get their produce from the field to market?
Well, Chris, those are real issues. But again, let me emphasize, I see the glass as half full and not half empty. If you had told the American public we would virtually shut down the entire supply chains and still be able to feed America and get drugs to America and continue to do critical work, I couldn't be more pleased how Americans are pulling together to get through this. So yes, there are issues. We're working through those issues. The task force is focusing on those issues. When we see them, we're figuring out how to fix them.
Now the president is calling for states to reopen, and a number of governors are around the country. But this week, the president talked about the possible cost of that. Take a look.
Will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon.
But Patrick Harker, head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, says if the economy opens too soon and the virus spikes again, quote, not only would this be a health catastrophe, but it would reverse the recovery as well. If that happens, he predicts, quote, a painful economic contraction of GDP in 2021 as shutdowns are reintroduced. Do you agree that there is a considerable risk, not to say you shouldn't do it, but there is a considerable risk to reopening, both from a public health and an economic standpoint?
Chris, if we do this carefully, working with the governors, I don't think there's a considerable risk. Matter of fact, I think there's a considerable risk of not reopening. You're talking about what would be permanent economic damage to the American public, and we're going to reopen in a very thoughtful way that gets people back to work safely, that has them social distance. One of the things we've seen, Chris, is a lot of businesses can do telework. Not everybody has to come back into the office at the same time, but people will be able to go into stores. Some of them will have reservations when they go in, but businesses will be able to reopen. And I think, as you know, certain parts of the country had very devastating impacts, like New York, and certain parts of the country didn't. And this is all being monitored very, very carefully.
Let's